They say the bond between twins is unique, a connection that transcends biology, touching something deeper, something almost spiritual. But what happens when that connection becomes a cage? What happens when love curdles into a mutual obsession so absolute that it shuts out the entire world? For June and Jennifer Gibbons, silence wasn't just a lack of speech. It was a weapon. It was a fortress. And ultimately, it was a death sentence. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if puppeteered by a single unseen hand. They spoke a language only they understood. But behind the silence lay a pact so dark, so inevitable, that it required the ultimate sacrifice. This isn't just a story about isolation, it's a story about a war fought within two bodies, sharing one tormented soul, and only one could survive the victory. To understand the end, we have to look at the beginning. Born in 1963, June and Jennifer were identical twins, daughters of Caribbean immigrants, who eventually settled in Haverford, West Wales. In the gray, overcast landscape of the 1970s, they stood out. They were the only black children in their community, and the isolation started early. Bullied at school, ostracized by neighbors, they began to retreat. But they didn't just retreat from the town, they retreated from reality. By the time they were teenagers, they had severed contact with everyone, parents, teachers, peers. They refused to speak to anyone but each other. But even then, it wasn't normal conversation. It was a high-speed Bajan Creole spoken so rapidly, it sounded like birdsong to the untrained ear. A secret code. Doctors called it elective mutism. But that clinical term fails to capture the eerie nature of their behavior. They became electromorphs, mirror images. If one scratched her nose, the other did instantly. If one took a step, the other matched the stride. They didn't just look alike, they acted as a single organism. Psychologists tried to separate them, sending them to different boarding schools. The result was catastrophic. They became catatonic. They froze, literally shutting down, their bodies going rigid as if the life force had been severed. The authorities had no choice but to reunite them. And when they did, the silence only deepened. Behind the wall of silence, a storm was brewing. Locked in their bedroom, surrounded by dolls and shadows, June and Jennifer created an elaborate, terrifying world. They wrote. They wrote obsessively, diaries, poems, novels. But these weren't the daydreams of teenage girls. Their stories were violent, filled with arson, theft, and twisted morality. In their diaries, the true nature of their relationship bled onto the page. It wasn't a peaceful union. It was a struggle for dominance. Jennifer wrote, "We have become fatal enemies in each other's eyes. We feel the irritating, deadly rays coming out of our bodies, stinging each other's skin. I say to myself, can I get rid of my own shadow? Without my shadow, would I die? Without my shadow, would I gain life, be free, or left to die? Without my shadow, which I identify with a face of misery, deception, murder." June wrote, "I am afraid of her. She is not normal. She is suffering from the deep, dark depths of misery, and she is driving me insane." They were possessed by each other, and soon the ink on the page wasn't enough. They needed to manifest the chaos. In 1981, the silent twins began a spree of petty crime, vandalism, and finally arson. They burned down a tractor shed. They tried to burn down a technical college. It was a cry for help, or perhaps a test of their own power. The legal system didn't know what to do with them. They were young, barely adults, Yet they terrified the authorities. They weren't sent to prison. They were indefinitely detained under the Mental Health Act and sent to Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility usually reserved for serial killers and the violently insane. For 11 years, they were held in Broadmoor. Witness accounts from the staff describe a chilling atmosphere. The twins were heavily medicated with antipsychotics, drugs that dulled their sharp minds and bloated their bodies. But the connection remained. Nurses reported walking past their separate cells and finding them frozen in identical poses, hours apart. Some claimed that even when separated by thick walls, they seemed to communicate. One would laugh, and the other, 3 rooms away, would laugh at the exact same second. Marjorie Wallace, the journalist who broke their story and gained their trust, described a relationship that was a sinister game of grandmother's footsteps. One twin would dominate, then the other. They were locked in a psychological death spiral. It was during these long, medicated years in Broadmoor that the Pact was solidified. They came to a terrifying realization. They could not live in the world as two. They were draining the life from one another. For one to truly live, the other had to die. By 1993, the decision was made to transfer them to a lower security clinic in Wales. They were 30 years old. They had spent their entire youth in captivity. This should have been a moment of hope, a step toward freedom. But Jennifer knew better. Days before the transfer, Jennifer spoke to Marjorie Wallace. She was lucid, calm, and utterly serious. She said, "Marjorie, I'm going to have to die." When Wallace asked why, Jennifer simply replied, "Because we decided." It wasn't a suicide threat in the traditional sense. There was no weapon, no poison, no plan for violence. It was stated as a biological necessity, a switch that had to be flipped. On the morning of March 9th, 1993, June and Jennifer boarded the van for the transfer. They were sitting together. According to June, Jennifer leaned her head on June's shoulder and said, "At long last, we're out." The van ride took scarcely an hour. But when they arrived at the Caswell Clinic, Jennifer Gibbons was unresponsive. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead at 9:30 a.m. Here is where the cold, hard facts of the medical report collide with the inexplicable. Jennifer was 30 years old. She was physically healthy, aside from the side effects of long-term medication. The autopsy was thorough. There were no drugs in her system that shouldn't have been there. There was no sign of foul play. There was no choking, no trauma. The cause of death was listed as acute myocarditis, a sudden fierce inflammation of the heart. Her heart simply stopped. But why? Myocarditis is usually caused by a viral infection or an immune response. Jennifer had been under constant medical supervision. There was no evidence of a virus. It was as if her heart had just decided to quit, on command, the moment the van doors closed. June's reaction was equally unsettling. In the days following her sister's death, she wrote in her diary. It wasn't a note of despair. It was a note of liberation. "I am free at last," she wrote, "liberated, and at last Jennifer has given up her life for me." June began to speak. She spoke clearly, fluently to everyone. The elective mutism vanished the instant Jennifer's heart stopped beating. She lives a quiet life now, independent, a singular entity. The spell was broken. We look for rational explanations. We say it was the stress of the transfer. We say it was an undiagnosed heart defect, masked by years of antipsychotics. We say the timing was just a tragic 1 in a million coincidence. But those who were there, those who saw the synchronized steps and heard the rapid-fire secret language, they aren't so sure the pact was fulfilled. One died so the other could live. It leaves us with a discomforting reality about the human mind and the connections that bind us. We assume our consciousness is contained within our own skull, private and secure. But if June and Jennifer were right, if a bond can be so strong that it requires a blood sacrifice to sever, then how much of your own mind is truly yours? And if you looked into a mirror long enough and your reflection started to make demands, would you have the strength to say no?